Authors Press.
Hey, it's syndicated radio talk show host, author, singer Al Cole, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. The guy that's going to be talking about family, his name is Cleo W. Robinson Jr., and I'll tell you, he's talking about family life in a small Texas community, actually hailing back to the 50s and the 60s, Sanderson, Texas. And that's what his book is all about. He's going to tell us about Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. And I'll ask the question to my listeners right now just to prompt what some of the things that Cleo is going to be talking about. Have you ever thought that, sometimes 21st century life is a little bit too tumultuous? A little bit too much stress and strain, not enough time to spend with your family and the people that you love? Well, maybe Sanderson, Texas was doing it a little bit better back then. And maybe there's something that we can learn from Cleo's book that can help us to adapt better to 21st century life. Yeah, see, that's what it's all about at People of Distinction. We always like to help people to develop other ways to think, other lifestyle directions, ways that can create peace and love in our lives. Nothing wrong with that. Peace, love, and understanding. That ain't funny. Boy, that's what everybody wants. Maybe Cleo's book is going to teach you something here. Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. And it's available at Amazon.com and, of course, Barnes & Noble, a lot of other places that Cleo will tell you about, including AuthorsPress.com. And he was brought to People of Distinction by Authors Press, one of the best in the publishing world. You got to move your book. Well, you got to move it through Authors Press. Go to AuthorsPress.com, and you can see what I mean. They're really great, and they offer Cleo's book as well, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. Let's welcome Cleo onto the People of Distinction stage for a spotlight interview right now on his book. Welcome, Cleo, to People of Distinction with Al Cole. How you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for the introduction.
Well, let's talk about it here. You wrote the book, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. Tell us why you wrote that book, Cleo.
I had two reasons, mostly to see if I could do it for my own entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to record for for the future, some of the people, the characters, and stories I picked up when I was down there. I spent 9 months between high school and college living in Sanderson, Texas, and the town was loaded with very interesting characters, mostly railroad and ranching people, a lot of cowboys, a lot of ranch owners, interesting people with fantastic stories to tell and interesting backgrounds. I collected some of these stories mentally. I also took this opportunity in writing this book to record some of the stories my dad told me years ago when I was a kid. He kept repeating them, and I should have had enough sense to make notes, but, back in those days, people would throw you a nugget and you didn't have enough sense to pick it up.
Uh-huh.
So I got some of his stories in there, too. This is a light-hearted book. It's written tongue-in-cheek. It's not all that serious. Many of the characters are real people, though, based on the stories they have are fantastically interesting, I think, and I don't think they should be lost to history, to the world. And I had a lot of fun writing it, especially the women. Now, the women are basically totally made out of my own imagination. The men were real people, a lot of Border Patrol officers, highway patrolmen, sheriff's officers, Texas Rangers were in the area, and they had some great stories. If the story sounds too outlandish to believe, it's probably true. I threw some fiction in there. I fleshed out the characters. all of my characters usually have some sort of special, unique thing about them, which makes them different. And it's a book I think almost anybody would enjoy reading. It does hark back to a simpler time. Sanderson, Texas, back in the mid 50s, was a thriving little ranch and railroad town. It's county seat of Terrell County, Texas. And you could get about anything you wanted in that town except a dental appointment. There's no dentist. That was 60 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find out until later is because Sanderson, Texas, for one thing, had naturally fluoridated water, and I guess cavities were a rarity in there. Anyway, the town has now since kind of dried up. The Southern Pacific Railroad moved out, and that was a downfall. So today, there's just sort of shadows of what used to be. It was a neat town, great people. I fell in love with the countryside. I fell in love with the characters I met, and so I put up the paper. It's not a kid's book. I wouldn't want you to give it to too young of a child, kid. There is adult situations. There's some violence. There's some sexual activity, and of course, they're adults. Several romances goes on in here, and so keep that in mind. I think it'd be a great book if you want to read during this quarantine we're going through, and then set it aside once you finish reading it, and take it on your long-awaited trip to the beach, mountains, or wherever you're going to go to your long-awaited and well-deserved vacation after our quarantine.
Yeah, you know,
the book discusses a lot of things. One of the deals is a young man's coming of age. And the assistance of an older lady to take him on the bridge from boyhood to manhood. There's a lot of stories about ranching. We got a lot of wildlife involved, rattlesnakes, mountain lions, javelina hogs, and such as that. We take you on a lion hunt. There's a lot of stories, a lot of tales involving horses, cattle dogs, and what have you. But the people, the men, are basically based on real characters. The stories are real. They're, of course, they're exaggerated a little bit and fleshed out. The women are basically developed from my own imagination. They're all treated with respect, however. These ladies were strong, capable women who knew what they wanted and were not shy about going about getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're treated with respect in my book. There's no women abused. In fact, they wouldn't permit themselves to be abused. So it's it's a book of characters involved in various situations and are all interlinked into my book.
Yeah, I think we're getting it. And I'm going to jump in and make a reflection here on what you're talking about, Cleo. A lot of what you're talking about I grew up with as well. I grew up north in the smallest state in the Union, Rhode Island. And the thing that we have in common here, not so much Rhode Island versus Texas, but simplicity, a simple sort of lifestyle, a community lifestyle. I grew up in a small town, and the small town that I grew up with, it was a town that had a lot of people from the Cape Verde Islands that nobody's ever heard of, except in the Northeast. There are a lot of people that emigrated from the Cape Verde Islands into this country. And when they did, they wanted to hear music that sounded like the island music. And the only music that they could see that sounded kind of like the island music was country music. Now, this is the connection here, Cleo. I was brought up with a lot of country music. And the country music that I was brought up with was, the early country music with Hank Williams and all of those people, and a lot of the people who have faded from the scene, but they're still some of the best. George Jones and everything. And I can relate to what you're talking about with that small town simplicity that then can become very complex in the relationships. And particularly when you're talking about the men, a lot of the songs that I used to hear, country music that originated, from the South, the men talked about their vulnerabilities. They talked about, a lot of drinking going on and stuff because they lost the woman that they really loved, and maybe they should have treated that woman better and things along that line. And the women who then came up after that, Dolly Parton and a whole bunch of others, they were strong women, and they spoke their mind. And even George Jones's wife, Tammy, I guess it was Tammy Wynette, speaking her mind. And so it was a really nice thing where, like you said, you treated women with respect, and these women were strong-minded women. I can relate to all of that. That is a wonderful part of Sanderson, Texas. Yeah, this is good. Is that making some sense here in the relationship that I'm drawing out too, Cleo?
Yeah, well, my women, like I say, were products of my imagination, but they're all strong. I think you'd have enjoyed being around them, and I think women would enjoy reading the book, seeing some of the situations these ladies had to deal with and how they dealt with them. Mm-hmm. In addition, you can get this book on an outfit called eBay and BAM, B-A-M, Books A Million, and Walmart. And if you have interest, look me up on www.CleoRobinsonBook.com and check me out. I also have another website, www.authorCleoRobinson.com. That'll tell you more about other writing. Like I said, this is an adult book, and I think most anybody will enjoy it, especially people who can relate to a small town and the characters that roam around it.
Another question here.
People that I actually knew and just fleshed them out, gave them some more characteristics, and let them tell them their stories.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a lot of fun writing these books.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let me ask you another question here that a lot of my listeners might want me to ask at this point. You've detailed the greatness of Sanderson, Texas. I have also added to that, validated that with some of the experiences that I had, actually in a whole different area of this country, that dittoed a lot of the things that were going on in Sanderson, Texas. How can we get back to a sense of simplicity and community in the United States of America? What's your reflection on that? How can we get back to that, Cleo?
I don't know. In this case, the community was centered around a hotel cafe. The Turner Hotel, which was built to basically accommodate railroad businesses, had a cafe, post office, and a small grocery store in it. So everybody coming to town was going to pass through that cafe probably sometime during the day. Coffee, conversation, famous apple pie, fantastic chicken fried steak, and conversations, were the key things here. This is where everything basically happened. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody would see each other there about every day. You're talking about country music. Sanderson was surrounded by hills, plus distance. So we had no radio reception, and we had no TV. So the music basically was either homemade or everybody had a hi-fi. So a lot of records were being passed around among the people down there.
Wow,
but
that's
people
interesting.
were, basically entertained themselves by talking to each other, living out on the countryside, hunting, doing some roping and stuff like that.
Yeah. At its height.
It's a great town.
At its height, what would you say the greatest population of Sanderson, Texas was at its height?
I'm not sure. Maybe 5,000,
That's
half Anglo, half Hispanic. I would estimate, and don't hold me to that. But when I was working down there, I ended up working on the highway department, Texas Highway Department, for 6 months. And I was the only blue-eyed, blonde-headed kid on that crew. And I was probably the youngest one on the crew and the only one that didn't speak Spanish. But I had a ball. They took good care of me, and I learned a lot about different people.
There you go. Hey, another reason to order this book, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas, by a special spotlight guest, Cleo W. Robinson, Jr. It talks about, hey, we can all get along if we give each other a chance. All nationalities, all ethnicities, and all religions, too. All backgrounds. We're all human beings, people. We all have a heart. We all have a soul. And we all really want love in our lives, and we want to enjoy our lives. If we understand that, well, we can get along, just like Cleo is saying. He was the only blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy, and a lot of Hispanics, but they got along really, really well in Sanderson, Texas. Yeah, so hey, it's a great book to look back on with an eye towards the future of let's formulate that sort of society again within the United States. We don't need a lot of contentiousness. Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. I want you to tell us again where this book is available, all the different places that people can buy it, including CleoRobinson.com, your website. And I think another one was CleoRobinsonAuthor.com. But fill us in on all the places that people can buy your book again, Cleo.
Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Authors Press, eBay, Books A Million, BAM, and Walmart. Then my websites, www.cleorobinsonbook.com and www.authorcleorobinson.com. There's quite a bit of information in those two websites that, some pictures and interviews and things of me and even my wife. So I would like to invite you to check those out. You might find them amusing.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's cap it off, the interview, with anything else that you want to say about your great book, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. Tell us anything else you want us to know about your book.
They're easy reads. They won't offend anybody, I don't believe. They're not for kids. You don't want to teach them too much about birds and bees, At least I don't want to.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they're not serious books, but there's some gems in there of real history. And there's no big message in this book. And if you find one, let me know. But it wasn't meant to be there. Then there's some just downright wild lies thrown through it. So if you can pick those out, you'll be okay.
All right.
You'll have fun reading it.
Absolutely. And fun is a part of life, people. So run to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a lot of the other places that Cleo was talking about where you can order his book, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas. And you got to love it. CleoRobinsonBook.com is another place where you can actually read up a little bit more on Cleo. Order the books there too. And remember, he was brought to us by Authors Press, one of the best in the publishing business. And you got a book you want to move, well, move it through authorspress.com. And I will just add another minute here, just saying, hey, people, this goes out to you, my listeners, right now, and anybody else that hears this interview. One of the things that we really have to get back to is respect. Respecting people for who they are. They're human beings. You know, nobody really comes out, and I'm talking about the first day that they were born, saying, I want to cause a lot of ruckus in this world. Boy, I want to spread a lot of hatred and dissension. Babies don't want to do that. Babies just want to live. And see, we all are babies on the inside. We're born that way. That's the first thing. And that baby wanted to honor life. Wow. I look around. I'm a baby. Oh, look at this. I'm born. That's the greatest blessing in the world. Just to be born to begin with and to experience life. Maybe the way that Cleo was talking about in Sanderson, Texas. If we start from that point of view, that everybody's born the same, we're all equal when we're babies, and then we have different life directions and experiences, but they can always bring us back to that innocence of just wanting to live and love and to spread the life and love and all the good things with other people that we like. And even if we think that we don't like certain people, let's try to understand them a little bit more. Maybe just the words are getting in the way. And once we start to listen to somebody else and their loves and likes and everything else in this world, the people that they love, they got an aunt that they love, a mother, father, a sister, brother, the wife, the kids. And now we're saying, I can understand you. You're just like me. You're just living a different lifestyle. But you're trying your best. And when we start to think that way again, we recreate that small-time happiness and that simplicity in life and that small-town happiness, too. And we love it on People of Distinction. One more reason to order that book, Trails to and Tales of Sanderson, Texas, by our special spotlight guest today, Cleo W. Robinson, Jr., and you can order it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also CleoRobinsonBook.com. Thank you so much, Cleo, for being my special spotlight guest here on People of Distinction with Al Cole. Wish you all the best with your book and your life directions. Thank you so much, Cleo.
Thank you.
Authors Press.